Hello, my name is Jaime Teevan, and I'm a researcher at Microsoft Research. I do information retrieval work, which means I study how people use search engines, and then I use what I learn to build better search algorithms. So basically what I'm trying to do is take those 1 or 2 word queries that you enter into a search box, and using that query identify from among the millions and billions of web pages that there are a few documents that are relevant to you. Something happened a few years ago to change the way that I think about search. A friend of mine and I were in Hawaii, and we were driving through the town of Wailuku. And as we were driving, we crossed a street called Keanu Street. And this led to a big discussion about whether Keanu Reeves, the actor, was born in Hawaii or not. I don't know how conversations like this were dealt with in the past. There were probably big arguments and friendships were lost. But lucky for us, computers are perfect for this. So my friend pulls out her smartphone, and I think this is great. I do information retrieval research. This is the whole reason I do it, is she's going to now do a search to find where Keanu was born. But instead, to my surprise, what she actually did was text a handful of her friends and ask where he was born. Within a few minutes, one of her friends wrote back and said Keanu wasn't actually born in Hawaii, but that his father was. And this really changed the way that I think about search. I always go about it thinking about this query that you enter into a text box. But really, when we want to know something, most of the time we ask somebody a question. And over the past couple of decades, we've built amazing tools to support searching for information, but we really haven't fundamentally changed the way that people ask questions. So my colleagues and I set out to try and understand how we might be able to better support and understand question-asking behavior using the computer and the internet and online social networks. So one of the things that's different about having an internet or the social networks to ask questions is that instead of targeting our question at just one person, we can broadcast that question to many people. So part of the reason that my friend got a response so fast was she didn't just text it to one person, she texted it to a number of people. And when you look at the way that people are using social media tools, you see that they're actually talking to a lot of people, and they're broadcasting questions to a lot of people and getting responses. So for example, Sheila, when she said, texted her friends, she could have just as well gone onto Facebook and posted something that said, does anyone know where Keanu Reeves was born? And gotten a response that way. So to study this, the first thing that we did was we went out and collected hundreds and hundreds of questions that people have asked on Twitter and on Facebook and through other social media channels. And we studied them. And one of the interesting things is the questions that we ask our friends are actually very similar to the questions that we search for on search engines. So we search for things like travel or entertainment or technology. But there are some key differences, and it's primarily we don't ask our friends things we wouldn't talk to them about at a cocktail party. So you see a lot more searches in the search engine logs for things like politics or religion or health. And although pornography is one of the more common queries that people search for on search engines, you don't see any questions broadcast to social networks about that. So given that our questions that we ask are very similar to the things that we search for, we were curious why people might actually choose to ask questions at their social network instead of just searching on their own. And we studied this in a number of ways, but one of the ways that's kind of fun is we had people race their social network to see who could find information the fastest. So to do this, we had people post a question to their social network on Facebook and then close that and go to their favorite search engine and search however they would normally. So for example, we had one person who posted the question, any tips for tiling a kitchen backsplash? He was trying to redo his kitchen. And then he went to the search engine and issued a bunch of queries like do-it-yourself kitchen remodels or backsplashing. And he spent some time doing that. So we had people do this for a number of different questions. So for example, one person, their spouse was going away, and so they posted a question asking if anyone had good recipes for them to cook while their spouse was out of town. Somebody else wanted to learn how to use their in-car GPS system and asked for advice on that. Another person was traveling to Cancun and wanted vacation tips or restaurants that they should eat at. And you can actually do this yourself. You can think about something that you might be an involved search for you that you're looking for, and go to your social network and post that question, and then go search on your own. And you know what the search experience looks like. You've done it a lot. Because these are topics that people care about, most of the time they spend about a half an hour looking for information. And we told them to stop whenever they felt like they were satisfied and had found what they were looking for. And then they went back to their social network to see what responses they had gotten. And in over half the cases, people had received responses from their networks before they were done searching on their own. So there's this real opportunity. As much as we think of search as this real-time, fast thing, social networks are actually a really efficient way to get information as well. A lot of the responses that people got were qualitatively similar to the information that they found by searching, but some of the responses were different that indicate some complementary use as a social network compared to using a search engine. One thing that we saw was that people were likely to receive responses that didn't actually exist on the web. So search engines can only identify information that's actually out there that they've indexed and crawled. On the other hand, when you ask a question of somebody, they can provide entirely new information. So in response to this question about recipes, we saw somebody go and type up their grandmother's handwritten recipe and provide that as a response. And that information just didn't even exist in a digital format. We also saw a lot of people make offers. So somebody was looking to go rock climbing in New Zealand, and a person responded and said, oh, you should go couch surf on my friend's couch there while you're rock climbing. And that offer wouldn't have existed either. It was very personally targeted at this person, and there's not like a source of it on the internet where you can just find places where you can, friends that you can stay with. In addition to finding information that may not be available on the web, people also received responses from their friends that were things they weren't looking for. So with a search engine, you can pretty much only find what you're actively looking for, but your friends know a lot of context about you and can actually give you unexpected responses. So we had one person who asked a question about how they had taken some recent training and they wanted to think about how they could use that training to grow in their career at the company they worked at. And one of their friends replied and said, oh, you shouldn't think about growing within your company. You should quit and start a consulting business. And the person really valued that response and said they would have never thought of it or never found it when searching the web because it didn't even cross their mind. And then the third benefit that people had was they created social connections with the questions that they asked of their social network. So for example, this person who is traveling to Cancun might have gotten a response that said, oh my gosh, you're going to Cancun? I'm so jealous. So that's a little bit about how people use questions and why they choose to do that. And we also wanted to look at how we might be able to ask effective questions. How do we broadcast our questions out into the world so that we get good responses? And this is another really fun study design that we did. In this study, we asked hundreds of people to all post exactly the same status to their social network. So for example, we had maybe 300 people post the question, should I watch the movie E.T.? And then we looked at the responses and we could look at how small factors varied the responses they received. So for example, if you posted in the morning, you might get different responses than if you posted in the evening. Or if you're a woman, you might get different responses than if you're a man. And one of the things that we varied was how exactly the question was phrased. So we saw really interesting variations when we were studying the questions, and we tried to use these to model the question phrasing. One thing that we noticed was that people ask really short questions. So Twitter, for example, gives you 140 characters to ask a question, and that's pretty short. But the average length of a question that people ask on their social networks is only 74 characters, which is half that length. So people are very compact when they're asking questions. So we tried an example where somebody was asking a short question or where somebody asked that question in a longer form. Another thing that we saw was that people sometimes asked questions as statements. So rather than saying, should I watch E.T., somebody might say, oh, I wonder if I should watch E.T. And so we explored also using the question as a question and question as a statement, which occurs in about 1 out of every 5 questions that people ask. Another thing that we noticed was people would sometimes scope their questions to particular groups. Somebody might say, oh, I wonder if my movie buff friends think that I should watch E.T. And we were curious about that. And sometimes they scoped it to a particular group, even when it wasn't an actual group. So they would say anyone in 20% of the cases. 20% of all questions asked on social networks say, does anyone think I should watch ET? Does anyone think I should go to Cancun for my vacation? So we tried that out as well. So this is an example of a question being asked. Mary Coe is in the long question case. So she says, taking it easy. I wonder if my movie buff friends think I should watch ET. She's also in the statement thing, so it's not phrased as a question, it's phrased as a statement. And she's directing her question at her movie buff friends. And these are some examples of the replies that she would see. So Sarah, for example, comes back and says, oh yeah, you should definitely watch ET, as long as you don't mean Entertainment Tonight. Her friend Stanley then goes on to provide additional information about ET, talking about how Steven Spielberg had this special edition where they replaced all the guns in that last scene with walkie-talkies, and he said, you shouldn't watch the special edition version, you should watch the original. And it's kind of funny, I actually learned a lot about ET through the course of running this study. Like, I didn't know Drew Barrymore was the little sister in the movie. And I didn't know E.T. was based on an imaginary friend that Steven Spielberg made up when his parents were going through a divorce. So as a side benefit, I got a lot of movie trivia out of it. And then Matt comes back, and he actually gives a purely social response, making sort of a silly comment. And this is pretty typical of the types of responses that people received. So we measured the quantity of responses that people got, the quality of the responses that people got, and also how fast they got responses. And so you can see, for example, that Mary is in the morning condition. She asked her question at 9:19 in the morning. And we found that asking questions in the morning get you faster responses. But when you ask it in the evening, the responses you get are better and you get more responses. So it's probably a better idea for you to ask your question at the end of the day rather than in the morning. We didn't find any differences in the responses that people received based on any demographic information like gender or age. The one thing that we did find correlated with responses was that if you have a larger network, you get better responses. And that's not that surprising. That means more people are seeing the questions and having an opportunity to respond to it. Mary was at a real disadvantage with the type of question that we gave her to ask of her social network. For one, the question that she asked was phrased as a statement rather than as a question. And we found that people who ask their questions as actual questions are much more likely to get a reply because it looks like a question, so there's an information need there. Likewise, having longer questions got you worse responses, so she should have left out this taking it easy piece. There was, though, a little bit of a qualitative difference between the longer questions and the shorter questions. The longer questions were less likely to have requests for clarification. So like this question about, do you mean entertainment tonight? Or, why are you watching a movie? Or what are you up to? Those questions were more common as a response when the question was shorter, probably because that additional context wasn't there. She did luck out, however, in that she targeted her question to her movie buff friends. And there we found that targeting your question to a specific audience actually got you better responses. And this may seem counterintuitive because you're actually, in some ways, lowering your audience that you're reaching. You're saying, I just want to direct it at a couple of people. But apparently those people, when it feels directed at them, then feel a greater responsibility to reply. And this happened not only when people said movie buff, but also when people said anyone. So she could have gotten just as good responses by saying, does anyone think that I should watch E.T.? So another thing, so that was good evidence that the questions that people ask influence the kinds of replies that they get. We also saw that the replies that people give influence subsequent replies. So if the first person gives an answer, subsequent people tend to build on that answer rather than providing an answer as well. So for example, here you see Stanley building with additional information about E.T. from Sarah's original question. And something like Matt's purely social commentary you almost would never see as a first reply. Those sort of replies come later in the conversation. So using everything that we learned about how people ask questions and why they're asking questions and the complementary advantages of asking questions and searching, we set out to build a tool that would help people ask questions better. So what we did was we created a friend on Facebook that you could actually friend, but that's automated. And this